Your membership is permanently revoked, the email read. I stared at the screen in my home office, the words refusing to make sense. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago. The gym, my sanctuary for 15 years, had sent me a formal termination notice citing inappropriate behavior with members. I'd never heard anything so absurd in my life. My hands went rigid around the mug. I set it down carefully before it could slip. The message said I'd made other women uncomfortable, that I'd made inappropriate comments, that the manager had received multiple complaints. None of it was true. Not a single word. I read the email 3 times, then a fourth, searching for context I'd somehow missed. There was none. Just the verdict, delivered without warning, without conversation, without any chance to respond. My phone rang before I could process what this meant. It was my daughter-in-law, Vivian. She called me Lyra, though I'd always preferred my full name. Have you seen what they're saying about you at the gym? Her voice carried that particular tone she used when she was enjoying someone else's misfortune. I could picture her perfectly, sitting in her pristine living room with one leg crossed over the other, that slight smile playing at her lips. I just got the email, I said carefully. What are people saying? That you've been harassing women, making them feel unsafe. It's quite the scandal, actually. I heard about it from 3 different people at book club this morning. She paused, letting that sink in. You might want to get ahead of this before it spreads further. The room tilted slightly. I had to set the phone down on my desk and press my palms flat against the wood to steady myself. Book club, 3 different people. This wasn't just the gym. This was already through our social circle, already weaponized into gossip. Vivian, I don't know what you heard, but it's not true. I've never done anything inappropriate at the gym. I go there, I work out, I leave. That's it. That's what you say, she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice now. But apparently several women have complained. The gym took it seriously enough to ban you permanently. Seems like there's no smoke without fire, doesn't it? I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because I was already beginning to understand what had happened, and the realization was making my chest feel impossibly tight. Vivian had access to my gym schedule. She knew I went Tuesday and Thursday mornings, Saturday afternoons. She knew which classes I took. She knew my routine better than anyone because I'd made the mistake of mentioning it to her during a family dinner 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. That's how long I'd been complaining about my lower back pain and how the gym's physical therapy classes had been helping. I have to go, I told her. I need to call the gym directly. Good luck with that, she said sweetly. I'm sure they'll believe you. I hung up before she could say anything else. My fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up the gym's contact page. The manager's name was Derek Paulson. I'd spoken to him dozens of times over the years. He knew me. He knew I was a regular, that I kept to myself, that I was professional and quiet, and absolutely not the kind of person to make anyone uncomfortable. But as I dialed the number, I already knew what I'd find. Because I was beginning to understand that Vivian hadn't just made a complaint. She'd orchestrated something far more calculated. The call to Derek confirmed my worst fears. He was apologetic, but firm. Multiple women had come forward with accounts of my behavior. He couldn't discuss specifics due to privacy concerns, but the pattern was consistent enough that they had no choice but to enforce their harassment policy. Derek, I promise you, I've never done anything like what you're describing. I barely speak to anyone at the gym. I'm in and out in an hour. Mrs. Pugh, I believe you're a good person, but I have to protect all our members. The complaints were detailed and credible. Who made these complaints? I asked. I can't share that information. Then how can I defend myself against accusations I don't even understand? There was a long pause. I'm sorry. The decision is final. I ended the call and sat in the silence of my office, trying to think through what had just happened. The gym had been my refuge. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning for 15 years, I'd gone there to work out, to clear my head, to be alone with my thoughts in a way that my marriage and my family life didn't allow. It was the one place that was entirely mine. And now, it was gone. The question that consumed me over the next 24 hours wasn't just who had made these complaints, it was why. Who would have both the motivation and the access to orchestrate something like this? Who would know my schedule well enough to make the story credible? I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, scrolling through my recent text messages and emails, looking for any interaction with Vivian that might have planted the seed for this. There. 3 weeks ago, a text message I'd sent her. Going to try the new aqua aerobics class at the gym tomorrow. My back is killing me. And then another. The instructor, Brenda, is amazing. She's so encouraging to everyone. And another. I'm going to go every Tuesday and Thursday from now on. It's really helping. I'd been sharing details about my gym life with her because I'd thought we were close. Because I'd thought she cared about my well-being. My son Marcus had married her 6 years ago, and I'd tried so hard to include her, to make her feel like part of the family. I'd invited her to lunches, to shopping trips, to book clubs. I'd asked about her job, her family, her dreams. I'd opened my life to her in the way that mothers-in-law are supposed to do. And she'd used every detail I'd given her like ammunition. The realization made me feel physically ill. I had to leave the kitchen and sit on the couch, staring at nothing, trying to understand the kind of person who would do something like this. Trying to understand why. My husband, Robert, came home at 6 o'clock as he always did. He found me exactly where I'd been for the past 3 hours, on the couch, still in my workout clothes from that morning, before everything had changed. Lyra, what's wrong? Are you sick? He set his briefcase down and moved toward me, concern creasing his forehead. The gym banned me, I said flatly. Permanently. They say I've been making members uncomfortable, harassing them. Robert's expression shifted from concern to confusion. What? That doesn't make sense. You love that gym. You're there all the time. I know. Well, we'll fix it. I'll call them. I'll explain that there's been some kind of mistake. There hasn't been a mistake, I said. At least, not on their part. Vivian made complaints about me. False complaints. She orchestrated this. Robert sat down slowly on the armchair across from me. Why would she do that? I didn't have an answer. Not a good one. Not one that made sense. Vivian and I didn't fight. We didn't have conflict. We were pleasant to each other at family gatherings. We texted occasionally about nothing important. There was no obvious reason for her to destroy my reputation and my sanctuary. I don't know, I told him, but I'm going to find out. Over the next week, I became a detective in my own life. I called the gym repeatedly, trying to get more information. Derek remained sympathetic, but unmovable. He couldn't share details about the complaints. It was policy. It was for everyone's protection. I reached out to women I knew from my classes. I sent careful, neutral messages. I've been having some issues with the gym, and I'm trying to understand what happened. Have you heard anything? Most didn't respond. A few replied with vague pleasantries. One woman, Sarah, whom I'd chatted with a few times in the locker room, actually called me. Lyra, I heard what happened, and I wanted to reach out," she said. "I don't know anything specific, but I will say that I never had any issues with you. You were always kind and kept to yourself. I'm sorry you're going through this." "Did anyone approach you? Ask you questions about me?" There was a pause. "Now that you mention it, yes. About 2 weeks ago, someone contacted me through the gym's app. They said they were doing a survey about member safety and asked if I'd ever felt uncomfortable around other members. They gave some examples. I said no because it was true. I never felt uncomfortable around you." My pulse quickened. "Do you remember what the message said exactly?" "Not word for word, but it was professional, seemed official. I just answered and moved on." "Why? Is that relevant?" It was everything. It was the proof I needed. Vivian had created a fake survey, contacted members through the gym's app, and systematically gathered complaints. She'd been methodical. She'd been careful. She'd done this with the precision of someone who understood how to work a system. After I hung up with Sarah, I called the gym again and demanded to speak with Derek in person. I told him I had reason to believe the complaints against me were fabricated. I told him about the survey. He listened, but his tone didn't change. "Mrs. Pugh, even if someone created a survey, that doesn't mean the complaints aren't real. Different people may have different experiences. But the survey was designed to prompt negative responses," I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. "That's not the same as genuine complaints. I understand your frustration, but we have to take member safety seriously. We can't reopen this." I ended the call and sat in my car in the gym's parking lot, a place I'd never be allowed to enter again, and I cried. Not because I'd lost access to the gym, though that was painful. I cried because I understood, in that moment, the full extent of what Vivian had done. She hadn't just attacked me. She'd attacked my character. She'd made me into something I'm not. She'd poisoned the well of my reputation in our community. And she'd done it so carefully that there was almost no way to prove it. That night, I decided I needed to confront her directly. I needed to understand why. I called Marcus and asked him to meet me for lunch the next day, just the two of us. He agreed, though he sounded confused. We didn't usually do lunch, just the two of us. Our family gatherings were always group events, orchestrated by me, the matriarch trying to hold everyone together. We met at a restaurant near his office. Marcus worked in finance, which meant he was always in a suit, always checking his phone, always half present even when he was physically there. He hugged me when I arrived, kissed my cheek, and asked me how I was doing. "I need to ask you something," I said once we'd ordered. "And I need you to answer me honestly." "Okay," he said cautiously. "What's going on?" "Has Vivian mentioned anything to you about complaints at my gym, about me being banned?" His face shifted. He looked away. He picked up his water glass and took a long drink. "Marcus." "She mentioned something," he said finally. "She said she'd heard from a friend that you'd been making some women uncomfortable. I told her it didn't sound like you. She said people have different sides, and sometimes you don't see them." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own son, my only child, had accepted his wife's version of events without ever asking me directly, without ever giving me the chance to defend myself. "She lied," I said quietly. "She fabricated complaints against me. She created a fake survey and contacted gym members to gather false statements. She orchestrated my ban from the one place that was mine." Marcus set down his glass. "That's a serious accusation, Mom." "I know it is. That's why I'm telling you. Because I need you to understand what your wife did. Why would she do that? He sounded genuinely confused, as if the idea that his wife might deliberately hurt someone was incomprehensible to him. I don't know. That's what I've been trying to figure out. But I know she did it. I have proof. What proof? I explained about Sarah's phone call, about the survey, about the timeline. As I talked, I watched Marcus's expression become increasingly uncomfortable. He wasn't angry on my behalf. He wasn't outraged. He was embarrassed. Embarrassed that his mother was making accusations against his wife. Embarrassed that I was putting him in this position. Mom, even if Vivian did create a survey, that doesn't mean she made up the complaints. Maybe she was just trying to gather information. Why would she need to gather information about me? She knows me. She knows I would never do anything like what she's claiming. People are complicated, he said, and the phrase sounded like something Vivian had taught him to say. Maybe she was concerned about something and wanted to understand the situation better. I stared at my son across the table and realized something that broke my heart more than the gym ban ever could. He was going to believe his wife over me. Not because the evidence supported her. Not because he'd investigated or asked questions, but because she was his wife, and I was just his mother. And in the hierarchy of his adult life, she came first. I see, I said quietly. Mom, don't be like that. I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm just saying that maybe there's a misunderstanding. Maybe you could talk to Vivian directly, clear the air. I'm going to do exactly that, I said. I didn't finish lunch. I paid for both our meals, hugged my son goodbye, and drove straight to Marcus and Vivian's house. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I knew Vivian would be home. She worked from home as a freelance consultant, which meant she had the flexibility to orchestrate elaborate schemes against her mother-in-law. She answered the door with genuine surprise on her face. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes, something that looked like fear. Then it was gone, replaced with her usual polished smile. Lyra, what a lovely surprise. Come in. I stepped into her perfect home, the home that Marcus and I had helped them buy a down payment for, the home decorated with the furniture we'd given them as housewarming gifts, and I felt the anger crystallize into something cold and clear. Why did you do it? I asked without preamble. Vivian's smile didn't falter, but I saw her hand tighten on the door. Do what? The gym complaints, the fake survey, all of it. For a long moment, she didn't respond. Then she closed the door behind me and gestured toward her living room. We sat on opposite ends of her designer sofa, and I waited for her to lie to me. I didn't think it would work, she said finally. I thought they'd investigate more thoroughly. I thought they'd ask you questions, give you a chance to respond. I didn't think they'd just ban you without even talking to you about it. The admission was so casual, so matter-of-fact, that I almost didn't process it. She was confessing. She was admitting to everything. Why? I asked. What did I ever do to you? Vivian stood up and walked to her window, looking out at her perfect yard. You didn't do anything specific. That's the thing. You were just always there, always present, always the perfect mother-in-law, always asking about my job, always inviting me to things, always making sure I felt included in the family. It was suffocating. I didn't understand. I was trying to make you feel welcome. I know. That's what made it worse. Because I couldn't dislike you. I couldn't point to something you did wrong and be angry about it. You were just relentlessly kind and present and involved in everything. And Marcus adored you. And every time you called or texted or invited us to something, I could feel him choosing you. Even when he was choosing me, he was still choosing you first. The words hung in the air between us, and I realized I was listening to the explanation for something far deeper than a gym ban. This was about Vivian's insecurity. This was about her feeling like she'd never be enough for her husband, because his mother was always there, always present, always the woman who came first. "So, you decided to destroy my reputation," I said flatly. "I decided to give Marcus a reason to choose me completely. If you were disgraced, if people in our community thought you'd done something inappropriate, if you were banned from your precious gym and humiliated publicly, then maybe Marcus would finally see that you weren't perfect, that you were capable of being messy and complicated and difficult. And maybe then he'd stop looking at you like you hung the moon." I felt something inside me break. Not the dramatic breaking of a heart shattering, but the slow, steady breaking of trust. The breaking of the belief that people, at their core, wanted to be good to each other. "Do you understand what you've done?" I asked quietly. "You've made me into a pariah in my own community. You've destroyed my reputation. You've made my son doubt me. And for what? So that Marcus would love you more?" "It's already working," Vivian said, turning back to face me. "He's been so supportive since this happened. He's been comforting me about the stress of your situation. He's been more present, more attentive. He's been exactly who I needed him to be." The cruelty of it took my breath away. She'd weaponized my son's sympathy. She'd used his concern for me against me. She'd created a situation where the more I suffered, the more he comforted her, the more he bonded with her over my downfall. "I'm going to tell him the truth," I said. Vivian smiled. "Go ahead. He won't believe you. He's already accepted the gym's story. He's already told his friends that you made some women uncomfortable. He's already decided that his wife would never lie to him about something like this. And even if you convince him that I orchestrated it, he'll forgive me. Because I'll tell him I was desperate to feel loved. And he'll understand that. He'll sympathize with me. And you'll be the one who looks vindictive for trying to turn him against his wife." I stood up to leave, and as I did, I understood the full scope of her victory. She'd calculated not just the initial attack, but the aftermath. She'd understood that even if the truth came out, the damage would already be done. Even if Marcus believed me, the trust between us would be fractured. Even if I proved her guilt, she'd already positioned herself as the victim of my vindictiveness. I drove home in a daze, my hands steady on the wheel, but my mind spinning. I went straight to my computer and began documenting everything. I pulled up the text messages I'd sent Vivian. I wrote down the timeline of events. I recorded the details of my conversation with Sarah. I compiled everything into a file and emailed it to myself with the subject line, "Proof." Then I called my husband. "Robert, I need you to come home early. We need to talk about Vivian." He was home within an hour. I showed him everything. I explained the timeline. I told him about my conversation with Vivian. I watched his face as he processed what his son's wife had done. "This is insane," he said finally. "We need to go to the police. This is harassment. This is defamation." "And say what? That she created a survey and contacted gym members? That she lied about me to our community? Even if we could prove it in court, the damage is already done. People believe it. Marcus believes it. Our reputation is already destroyed." "So we just let her get away with it?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know what we do." We sat in our kitchen as the afternoon light faded, and I realized that I was facing a choice. I could spend the next months or years fighting Vivian, trying to clear my name, attempting to convince people that the accusations were false. I could destroy my relationship with my son in the process. Or I could do something different. I could disappear, not physically, but from the life I'd been living, from the gym that no longer wanted me, from the community that now saw me as inappropriate, from the role of the perfect mother-in-law trying to hold my family together through sheer force of will and presence. The next morning, I called Derek at the gym one final time. "I'm not going to appeal the ban," I told him, "and I'm not going to pursue this further. But I want you to know that the complaints against me were fabricated. I want you to know that I was set up by someone who had access to my schedule and my personal information. I want you to know that your investigation was compromised by someone who was using your system to hurt me. And I want you to know that I'm going to let it go anyway." "Mrs. Pugh," he started, but I cut him off. "I'm going to let it go because fighting for my reputation in a place where I'm no longer wanted isn't worth the energy. But I needed you to know the truth." I hung up, and I didn't call back. Instead, I did something radical. I stopped trying to hold my family together. I stopped reaching out to Marcus and Vivian. I stopped organizing family dinners. I stopped asking about their lives. I stopped being the glue that held us all in place. And slowly, inevitably, we drifted apart. Marcus called a few times, confused by my sudden distance. I was polite but brief. I didn't explain. I didn't accuse. I simply wasn't there anymore in the way I had been before. Within 6 months, the calls stopped. Within a year, we'd established a new normal where we saw each other only on holidays, and even then, the warmth had gone out of our interactions. He'd chosen his wife over me, which was his right, but I'd chosen myself, which was mine. I found a new gym on the other side of town. It took me a few weeks to feel comfortable there, but eventually, I did. I made new friends in my classes. I built a new routine. I reclaimed the part of my life that had been taken from me, just in a different place. Robert and I went to therapy, not because our marriage was in trouble, but because we needed to process what had happened. We needed to understand how our family had fractured and what it meant for our future. The therapist helped us understand that sometimes people hurt you, not because you've done anything wrong, but because they're wounded in ways you can't fix. A year after the ban, I ran into Sarah at the grocery store. She recognized me immediately and pulled me aside. "Lyra, I've been wanting to reach out to you for months. I found out what happened. A friend of mine told me that Vivian had created the survey, that she'd been the one making the complaints. I felt terrible that I'd been part of it, even unknowingly." "It's not your fault," I told her. "You answered honestly. That's all you could do." "I wanted to go to the gym and tell them the truth, to clear your name." "I appreciate that. But I've moved on. I found a new gym. I'm happy there. I've decided that my reputation with the people who matter is more important than my reputation with people who were willing to believe the worst about me without asking questions." Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's wise. I'm sorry you had to go through that." "So am I," I said. "But I'm also grateful, because it taught me something important." That night, I thought about what I'd learned. I'd learned that you can't control how people perceive you. You can't prevent people from believing lies about you. You can't force people to stand by you, even when you've done nothing wrong. What you can control is how you respond. What you can control is whether you let their lies define you. I'd also learned that sometimes the people closest to us are capable of hurting us in ways that are almost incomprehensible. That love doesn't always conquer jealousy and insecurity. That family bonds, while powerful, can fracture under the weight of resentment and manipulation. But most importantly, I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could survive being cast out of my own community, that I could rebuild my life in the aftermath of betrayal, that I could be happy again, even after everything had fallen apart. 2 years after the gym ban, Marcus called me out of the blue. It was a Sunday morning, and I was in my kitchen making coffee when his name appeared on my phone screen. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. "Hi, Mom," he said, and his voice sounded different, smaller somehow, less certain. "Hello, Marcus. I need to talk to you about something. Can we meet?" We met at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. Marcus looked tired. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He ordered a coffee and sat across from me, and for a long moment, he didn't speak. "Vivienne and I are getting divorced," he said finally. I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't sure what to feel. Relief? Vindication? Sadness for my son? "I'm sorry," I said, because that seemed like the right thing to say. "The thing is, I think I've known for a while that something was wrong, but I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to admit that I'd made a mistake. And then, about 6 months ago, I found messages on her phone. Messages where she was talking to her therapist about what she'd done to you, about how she'd fabricated the complaints, about how she'd done it because she was insecure about our relationship. I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite forgiveness, but something close to it. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I owe you an apology. Because I should have believed you when you told me the truth. Because I chose to believe my wife over my mother, and I did it without even asking you for your side of the story. And I've spent the last 2 years regretting that choice." I reached across the table and took my son's hand. "I forgive you," I said. "But I want you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was before. I'm not going to go back to being the mother who's always available, always present, always trying to hold everything together. I'm going to have boundaries now. I'm going to protect myself." "I understand," Marcus said. "And I respect that. I just wanted you to know that I know the truth now. And I'm sorry." We didn't immediately rebuild our relationship. That would have been too easy, and nothing about this situation had been easy. But we began, slowly, to find our way back to each other. Not as the mother and son we'd been before, but as two people who'd been hurt and had learned to survive it. I never returned to my old gym. I never attempted to clear my name publicly. I never tried to convince people that the accusations were false. I simply let it go and moved forward with my life. Today, 3 years after the gym ban, I'm in a place I never thought I'd be. I'm stronger. I'm more independent. I'm more protective of my energy and my time. I don't spread myself thin trying to make everyone happy. I don't sacrifice my own well-being for the sake of family harmony. I go to my gym 3 times a week. I have friends who know me and value me for who I actually am. I have a marriage that's stronger because Robert and I weathered this storm together. And I have a relationship with my son that's based on honesty and respect, rather than obligation and expectation. Vivienne is no longer part of my life. Marcus sees her occasionally for practical reasons related to their divorce, but she's not part of our family gatherings anymore. And I've made peace with that. I've made peace with the fact that she tried to destroy me and failed. Not because I fought back, but because I refused to let her destruction define me. The hardest lesson I learned through all of this is that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones closest to us. And sometimes the only way to heal is to create distance, to protect yourself, to choose yourself over the people who've chosen to hurt you. If you're facing a similar situation, If someone has lied about you, if your reputation has been attacked, if you're struggling to know who to trust, I want you to know that it's possible to survive it. It's possible to rebuild. It's possible to be happy again, even after everything has fallen apart. But first, you have to choose yourself. You have to decide that your peace is more important than your need to be believed. You have to accept that some people will never understand the truth. And that's okay, because the people who matter will eventually see you for who you really are. If you've experienced betrayal by someone close to you, share your story in the comments below. Let's support each other through the process of healing and moving forward. Hit follow if this hit close to home.